talking about quantum spinal mechanics today. So let me give you guys a little bit of background on this. So this is kind of the new technique in upper cervical right now. It's coming from this guy called Russell Freeman. And Russell was a big shot. Russell was board certified in orthospinalogy, got over that, went and got board certified in Nuka. And if you know anything about Nuka, that's kind of a big deal. Nuka is super strict on the regulations, so only about 20-something people in the world are board certified in Nuka. And as he kept getting deeper and deeper into the Nuka, he started seeing subtle flaws within the technique that he wasn't okay with. First of all, Nuka, what they do is they'll fudge numbers sometimes. And before I really get into this, I want you guys to kind of have a disclaimer that I went to the first module. There's a second half to this thing. I'm just a student. I'm explaining it the best I can to you guys. I'm not going to be giving you guys the complete picture. Only Russell and the organization can do that. I'm going to be giving you my student perspective of it. Other disclaimer I want to have is that I'm not shooting down Nuka, not shooting down any other techniques. I think they're super valid. I'm just going to be presenting this one in comparison to the others so that we have a reference point for history and for analysis, okay? Hi guys. So, getting back into it. What Russell had issues with in Nuka is fudging the numbers. Now, if you know anything about Nuka, you're going to be taking some x-rays, you're going to be drawing a whole bunch of lines, you'll be pulling a whole bunch of numbers off of them. And through all those numbers, you're going to calculate a really specific vector point, right? So they might have a vector where you're coming in at 3 degrees with the headpiece down. But what happens is, they tend to fudge numbers, meaning that they'll have calculated the vector, but they'll be like, oh, just add 2 millimeters to it because of this rule or exception. And he's like, well, if it's so math-based, why would we change the numbers? Math is a universal constant. Math isn't wrong. If something's wrong, it's us as a practitioner. And so fudging the numbers was a really big issue he had with it. And the other really big problem he had with it was x-rays. X-rays have never been super validated in the research, ever. Now, Nuka is working on trying to get validation for that now, and their research will be done by the end of the year. But they've never done a reliability research on x-rays, saying that two people can take the nasium of the same person, get the same x-ray, get the same numbers and the same vector. So if there is no reliability in x-ray, how can we base everything we do on it? So he started to think a little bit out of the box. Now, he comes from an engineering background, and he started applying models he had in engineering towards the human body, and it led him towards this concept of tensegrity. Now, has anybody in here heard of tensegrity before? It's huge in the BGI world. And tensegrity, tensile integrity. So when you think of something, think of the body as two pieces, compressive forces and tensile forces. The compressive forces are going to be bone, right? They're going to be hard and thick. And what's holding them all together is the tensile forces of the fascia. So have you ever seen those tensegrity models? We have a couple in the library where there are those couple sticks, and none of the sticks touch each other or link together. But it's an array of strings holding them together into this giant unit, you know? It could be a tower. And what happens is you can't change the compressive forces. Those are static. But you can change the tensile forces, and if you take one of those strings and pinch it, the entire structure will start to deform. Does that make sense? And BGI really embraces this model in their adjusting. Well, he started taking the idea of compressive and tensile forces into the body, and how does that affect somebody's anatomy? So, basically, what he did was he created this new technique that's not vector-based. It's not going to be like we're going in this way or this way. We're going after the tensegrity of the body. We're trying to find the points that are contracted and put energy into the body that can release these and even unwind the body. And so what we'll be doing is analyzing posture before and after the adjustment as our primary objective of what we're trying to change and correct. Now, when I got there, the beginning of the seminar was about Nuka. It was to give us a historical background of where we came from so we know where to move forward from. And he taught us all about x-ray placement and how to draw the lines. And in this technique, even though it is not dependent on x-rays, they're still utilizing x-rays. They're still taking the nasium, they're still drawing the lines on it, and this way they can do a post and compare the post to the pre without anything based on the x-ray. And what's really awesome about this is they took 300 cases he had, did pre and post x-rays on all of them, and found that he was able to reduce laterality 99% of the time on these post x-rays without making an adjustment based on the x-rays. And this is what is really cool about it, is that this technique is restoring people to orthogonality. That is, it's bringing their neck back up straight, it's bringing their atlas level, and bringing their head 90 degrees parallel or perpendicular to that atlas. And see, that's really what our goal is to restore somebody to orthogonality. And you can do it directly through an orthogonal upper cervical approach. But what if we could go around that system with a tensegrity approach? And the thing is, like I said, it's really effective at reducing laterality. In the upper cervical world, we know when you reduce laterality and the symmetry underneath the head, the body does better. It does better neurologically, structurally, has better integrity overall. So that is our goal with this. So coming back to tensegrity for a while, his primary objective is to correct the bow. And now when he talks about the bow, he's going to say that you're going to see this. You're going to see a low shoulder, you'll see a high hip. And what you see is the spine will do this. It will create a bow. And what that means is that the tensile are tight on this side, and they're bringing you like this. And what happens is now the head has to come back up. Now this is definitely different than what we think of in upper cervical world. Upper cervical, it's always that atlas goes out and everything below it starts to kink. He says, Newton's third principle, large matter moves small matter. Whereas if this huge matter of torso goes this way, the small balancer of the head has to compensate and equally and opposite react to keep us in level, right? And this plays back into the writing reflex. Our eyes need to be level with the horizon so that we have equal optical input. Our vestibular canals work better. Our head has to be level. So what is it? Is it the head does this and the body does that? Or is it the huge mass of the body does this and the head comes back up to balance it? And what you see is, when you see this bow, this is going to be our primary objective to fix. By doing forces coming up this way, we're going to send energy up and over the system, and it's going to balance that bow and bring them back up. And this huge, it's not a segmental adjustment, is what we're thinking of. It's not that, oh, T4 is out and L1 is out. It's that when you're like this, every single bone is out of alignment. Can you understand how we can make a really big global impact on somebody's entire neurology through this principle? So, next, he talks about the box. Now the box is essentially, we're missing board over here. The box is going to be C0, can't see that, C0 plus C1 plus C2 to the VP equals VP to the pelvis. What that means is this is going to be your primary box. VP to pelvis. Everything in there does this bow, does this conformation. And the other, the balancer, occiput C1 and C2 are going to have an opposite reaction. So when we start talking about this in the box, we kind of get to this type 2 paradox. Now the type 2 paradox in Nuka is if your neck is like this and your head's like this, the balance, we call that a type 2, acute angles on the same side. What Nuka or advanced orthogonal, any other orthogonal technique would do is they come up and underneath and try and send their forces around to bring the head back to orthogonal. But if your head is like this, right, you see the bow. The bow is coming this way. Sorry. If the bow is like this, your head comes this way. And so you've got a type 2 on this side. So if you were going to do that and come in at this angle, the forces would go up and over and bring the bow smaller. Does that make sense? Instead, what he would do is come up on this side, and it would go up and over. And although that's opposite the listing that other orthogonal techniques would do, you balance out the bow, you bring it back to symmetry, the head doesn't have to do the compensation for the body. Does that make sense? So that's where he starts to see biomechanics and our forces we're putting into the body a little bit different than how traditional orthogonality and chiropractic goes. So I was reading this research that they put together. It was an article somebody wrote, And he says it's not in dispute that once misalignment of the upper cervical elements has occurred that they cause the progressive and degenerative effects we have come to know as the atlas subluxation complex. It is rather that the misalignment pattern represents the best fallback position the body can accomplish given its options. He's saying that body doesn't want to be like this, putting pressure on the brainstem and all sorts of other neurodegenerative principles. Is that it has no other option because this misconstruction of tensile forces in the body is only giving it the option to do that. And so when we can clear this out, we can clear this out. So it gets kind of neat. So what he does is digital posture. So yes, first he looks at the bow. It's going to be his primary thing. Next he's going to be looking at weight distribution. In orthogonality, we should be equal on both legs. I bought us a pair of scales. They're going to stay in the toggle room. This is my donation to club for the quarter. And what we can do is see if posture is even. So you tap, tap, have them stand equally, look ahead and wait for the scale to calibrate. What I should see is I should be equal leg to leg. What happens is I'm 84 on this side and 76 on this side on the balance. And that comes into our listing. So our listing is going to be a combination of the bow, the posture distortion, and the pelvis. Like I was saying, large matter moves small matter. So if the pelvis is rotated this way with the right hip anterior, the head has to rotate this way so that I can stay looking where you're going. So what he's going to say is, he's going to say this person has a right bow, they're heavier on their left leg, and they have a right anterior pelvis. And taking all of these into account, we're going to decide how to adjust them on the table. I'll be showing that to you guys later today, a couple minutes. So when you take all these into account, you can literally balance their weight from your pre to your post. You can literally unwind their hips using the atlas as your steering wheel. So when I talk about atlas as a steering wheel, he chooses to use the atlas as his primary point of input into the system. As in, the atlas is the only part of the spine that has three-dimensional movement, right? You can go this way, or this way. So if he's trying to correct the hips, he can use the atlas in the head to position it and access a certain quadrant of tensegrity. So this is kind of how it works. When you bend the head to the right, you're going to compress this lateral mass, this condyle, and this axial will come up. And when you compress the right side like this, you're now accessing the right side of their body. That's why we would have the headpiece up. When we have the headpiece down, we're closing down this side, we're accessing this side of the body. Same thing with the chin. If the chin is tucked and we're compressing the anterior elements, when we put our forces in, we're accessing the anterior compartment of the body. When we bring them into extension, we're accessing the posterior compartment of the body. So we can start dividing the body up into quadrants. So what happens is, I'm going to have a right anterior hip, and my bow is like this. And by bringing the head like this, we're able to access this quadrant. By bringing the head forward, we're allowed to come into that hip and unwind the hip while unwinding the bow simultaneously. And so we do a series of short little tissue pulls, basically, is how it looks. And I'll show you guys in a minute. And they're really gentle. They're about a millimeter deep on the skin. And what he talks about is accessing pathways. So I just showed you guys how to access that pathway. You position the head into the way you want, and you're putting tissue pulls into the system, waiting for you to break tension, break compression, and restore tensegrity to the system. Balance their posture up, balance their weight, balance the hip rotation. Those are basically our three objectives. And then he sees that now the atlas can go back to where it needs to be. But he's just using this as a contact. And he's not trying to move the position of the atlas from right to left or from anterior to posterior, because I said it's not based on the position of the atlas. It's based on these planes of fascial tension in the body. So that's why it's not like deep and linear into the bone. He's coming up and over the skin to access it. Yeah.
So if he's trying to alter the tensegrity of the body, why does he access it up here?
Because the atlas serves as a three-dimensional lever point. Okay. So if we're trying to bring this hip back, we could push the hip back, but we wouldn't be able to access this unit.
Okay. All right.
Yeah. we can literally steer it in any direction. So by bringing it here and here, we're accessing this plane, back this plane, and we're literally able to access the entire body. And he does come from an upper cervical background. You know, he's been doing upper cervical for 20 years. Maybe that's why he chose this. But logically, it makes sense. That's the only point. And so that's exactly what he does. He accesses the pathway, and he sets the energy to enter the flow of resistance, and then he removes the resistant pathways. He says this is not a vector or a linear adjustment because misalignment isn't linear. And every time you have this vector and you do a pull on it or a pulse, it changes a little bit. Now you have a brand new vector. How can you keep using that one vector to correct it all the way if the vector is constantly changing as you continually intervene? So, who wants to get adjusted? I need one volunteer. Gary?
No one else.
Come on up. Okay. I've done a lot of talking. It's really just best to see this. Now what I really like is that this adjustment is easier on your body than Nuka is. Meaning that there's not 14 steps into it, a giant tissue pull or triceps pull. And what happens is when you're doing this triceps pull, you have so much internal struggle in your body that you're not able to focus on the patient's body. And since I'm not at such a point of tense in my body, I can focus on him and wait until I feel that pathway break. So go ahead and face the audience. I want to see your normal posture. So go ahead and walk in place, shake it out. And what we see is...
He should take his sweater off.
You guys see the bell? I want you guys to see if you can see the bell. What's it look like to you guys? Low right shoulder. High right hip. He's got a left bow. That's what we would call it. And so we're always going to do that having his right side up now, okay? Now, let's look at his weight distribution. So go ahead, come here. Tap, tap. Go ahead and stand on them equally and face the audience. Now these scales, like I said, aren't calibrated when I bought them. You got to check them when you buy them, take them out of the box, but we have these in here. Now this one's about a pound heavier. It's 83.8 on this side and 68.6 on this side. I'm going to write that up. 83.8, is that what I said?
Is that right side or left?
83. Go ahead and do it one more time. Right bow. 83.8 on. Alright, go for it. Look straight ahead. Alright, 70.6 and 82 on the right. 82.0 on the right, and what did I say, 70.6 on the left. And then lastly, come here, stand straight right here, face the audience. I'm going to look at the rotation in his hips. Now, what Friedman does, he has this really cool thing that has these little laser pointers, and you point them right on the PSIS, and it can measure the distance from the back of the unit to the PSIS. And that way you can see with a laser measurement and objective finding that, yeah, that left hip is rotated anterior. For us, we're just going to have to do it by hand, okay? I see he's got a right anterior hip, okay? So this is how I kind of draw my listing. Is that this is what he looks like. He's got this, here's his right, here's his left from the back. He's got this, your low right shoulder. He's got this right bow coming like this, and he is heavier on his right side, and his right hip is anterior, okay? So this is how we're going to do it. I'm not going to actually do the adjustment. I'm just going to show you guys what it looks like. Come on over. Lay your left side down. There's 3 parts to the QSM adjustment. Now, what you're trying to do is get them balanced. And in a lot of people, what happens is when you put the energy up and over to access the bow, it comes this way and pushes them back this way. So if he has a right bow and he's heavy on the left side, this would come up and over and bring him to balance. Now, if he had a right bow and he was heavier on the right side, we did this up and over and make it worse on the right side. And then we would bring into the third part of the adjustment. We would flip him over, hit him on the other side, sending this I to S component down to bring him back equal. And what you do is you do a couple pulls, you wait for you to feel the tensegrity, or you feel the tension break, you let them walk around, let it settle in, and then you reevaluate them. So what we're going to be doing is he's got a left bow, so his right side is up, and the first part is called integration. He's got a right anterior hip. So what you would do is, since his right hip is anterior, you position his hips like that, bring it a little posterior. And this is my own thing. Whenever you start influencing the body, you're summating an effect into it with the neurology. So by putting his right hip posterior and then adding input through the adjustment, I'm retraining his body that his hip should be here. That's probably a good reason why they do it and see effects with that. He's heavy on the right side, and okay. So what we're going to do is, his headpiece is up, which means we're going to be accessing this side of his body. His right hip is anterior. So what we want to do is we want to have an energy come up and bring this hip back. So since we're coming up and through, we're going to tuck his chin. Now we're accessing the right anterior quadrant. Does that make sense? And all the energy that we put into this will be coming up and through to bring that hip around. Since this hip is anterior, so in integration, the first thing you do is going to be S to I pulls. Now, he explains this as smoothing out the crinkles in the spine. What we do is we're going S to I. We want to get sort of parallel to it, get over it, and you're relaxed. You're not like 14 steps. I just want to get my center of mass over his atlas. What I do is it's a really gentle wrist connection, and you'll be doing these small sweeps, S to I, S to I, S to I over his body. Like I said, his bow is this way, right? It's got that low right shoulder sweeping to the left. By doing this, it's not correcting the bow. It's smoothing out the crinkles. It's bringing that C2 spinous back. It's getting him ready for the decompression phase of the adjustment. So this first part we call integration. And for him, I would be doing these small little S to I breaks. And then to bring that hip back, I would be doing A to P swipes. So I do these, and I do these now. Yeah.
Sorry. So if they're just sweeps, why do you use the sort of reinforced kind of Nuka stance?
And I was asking that. Could I just get down here and do this on it? Probably. But what's better for me, my body, what's going to last me a little bit longer?
Bending over like that.
It's going to give you a little bit more matter and energy behind it. And this is a part of the seminar I did not completely understand, was the adjustment. Where do you generate your energy from? By kind of getting over here, I'm getting it from my pelvis, my shoulders, and my wrists. So it's not just like that. Like I'm actually like using some of my energy, generating energy through my body into his. Sending it into these pathways of resistance, and thus releasing and unwinding the system. So we do that for integration. We're going to be bringing it up, and then we'll be bringing it back. We'll be doing these A to P swipes. Now, there's a third component called torque. This one is going to be really powerful. So by doing a clockwise torque like this, I would again be bringing that energy up, over, through that hip to start driving it back. Now they say that you really don't need to do torque. If you're having trouble equalizing the patient, you can start adding torque into the phase, okay? So that first step is called integration. Next we're going to go to decompression. So go ahead and sit up for 1 minute. Decompression is always going to be headpiece down. Alright, go ahead and lay down again.
I think it's going to drop.
Is it?
Yeah, you need to raise the front piece.
Yeah,
Let's just get you on there real gentle. This table's a little bit. There we go. Yeah, you're good. And then go ahead and lay it facing that way. Okay, so now headpiece is down. I'm closing the left side of his body, I'll be accessing that point of his body, okay? So by doing these small now I to S sweeps, coming over, just doing these gentle sweeps over, waiting, feeling for the energy to break, I'm sending energy up through his head, down this side, and thus opening that bow. We call this decompression phrase, because this is all compressed, and you're bringing them from down and closed to up and open. He says up and open a lot, yeah.
And what do you mean when you say energy?
I mean, we're generating energy is what we're doing. We're taking force and we're putting them into this band. That's what you really have to see the body as, is a band of connected tissue, and that we're accessing that pathway. That's the best I can explain it as. There's an element of feeling that you'll get as you do this over a while. You'll start to feel it more. This is really where I really want to start addressing those hips. So like I said, he had a right anterior hip, so I'll be positioning him with that posterior hip. But now, I'm accessing the left side of his body. So what I'll be doing is actually put him in extension here, so my energy comes back and brings, yeah, that left hip is posterior. I'm accessing the left side. Since the right hip is anterior, the left hip is posterior. I'm accessing the left side, I take him into extension, now I'm coming behind him. I can do this kind of torque, counterclockwise torque, again, to bring that left posterior hip forward, and then I can do, instead of A to P, doing P to A strokes on him. And those P to A strokes will bring that left posterior hip forward, since that's the pathway I'm accessing. So this is what it would look like. It would look like these tiny little I to S strokes, and then like I said, P to A strokes. And those P to A strokes are driving this hip forward, driving this hip forward. Does that make sense? Now what you see here is as I come here, energy goes like this, and it pushes him higher onto this right hip. So to bring him off that right leg, we'd actually go ahead and flip you. Go ahead and face me. And this is where everything goes crazy. In what other upper cervical technique do you flip them over? None. But in this way, it makes sense. Because now, if I was to keep coming in on this side, I keep pushing him in the wrong direction. Yeah. So this is going to be called, what's the name of this last step? It's accessing the frontal plane, and it's trying to balance their weight. You only do this if these are ipsilateral to each other. And you see here, this bow is ipsilateral to this. I'm not going to be accessing it. So again, I'm going to bring this headpiece up. Hold on. And you're good. Bringing the headpiece up, I'm now accessing the left side of his body. And by doing a couple more S to I strokes, setting the energy down this way, driving him off that left leg back to even. So that's the 3 steps of the adjustment. And I'd only be doing that, again, if those are on ipsilateral sides. Thank you very much. You're done. Thank you. Yeah. So this is the cool thing is, A, it's really gentle. Really gentle. You can do it on anybody. B, it's really easy. It's easier on your body. It's easy to learn. There's more to it. What he starts getting into, the head as an extremity, is his new seminar, where he says, let's say you balance the bow, but they're still like this, just out of pattern. Now you can start doing more of these strokes to start rolling their head back up and over. So that's an overview of quantum spinal mechanics. I hope you guys have a little bit better of an understanding